Walk into any Starbucks in America and you'll see something strange. People aren't just grabbing coffee and leaving. They're staying for hours, working, meeting friends, thinking, like living. A $6 latte that anyone could make at home for 50 cents, but somehow a brand convinced millions of people to pay 5 times more. How did a coffee chain become a workspace for some, a daily ritual for others, and an unspoken cultural stamp across the entire country? A tiny Seattle shop that opened in 1971, now serving 100 million customers every single week, and sitting on a valuation of over $100 billion, more than some countries' entire GDP. That tiny shop now shapes the daily rhythm of millions of Americans. It became a habit. Impossible to break. Something is happening here. Something deeper than a drink. What is Starbucks really selling? And what are you actually buying? Because let's be honest, if they were selling just coffee, this story wouldn't even exist. So the real question is, what did Starbucks create that became more valuable than the coffee itself? To understand, let's go back to where the story truly started. Sit tight, because once you see it, you'll never look at that green mermaid logo the same way again. This is The Quiet Genius. The story begins in 1971 in Seattle's Pike Place Market. Back then, Starbucks wasn't a cafe at all. It sold roasted beans, equipment, and taught customers how to brew better coffee at home. The founders were Jerry Baldwin, Gordon Bowker, and Zev Siegel, three men who cared deeply about craftsmanship. Jerry Baldwin was an ordinary teacher turned coffee purist, obsessed with bean quality and roasting precision. Gordon Bowker, a writer and creative thinker, pushed for a brand identity built on authenticity rather than trendiness. Zev Siegel, on the other hand, a history teacher, had a passion for artisan businesses and believed America needed better quality coffee. All three were heavily influenced by Alfred Peet, a Dutch immigrant who founded Peet's Coffee in Berkeley in 1966. Peet was basically known for roasting coffee at higher standards and introducing Americans to darker, stronger European-style coffee. He became a mentor to the Starbucks founders, teaching them everything from bean sourcing to roasting techniques. Their vision was simple: quality, no experience. The Starbucks we know today didn't even exist yet. The turning point walked in 11 years later, when a young man named Howard Schultz joined Starbucks in 1982 as head of marketing. Schultz didn't come from the coffee world. He came from the world of sales, business, and human experience. He knew that the purpose of business is to make profits. He was wise and smart. He grew up in a public housing project in Brooklyn and often describes his early life as the reason he understood people more than products. And this is one of the qualities everyone businessman should know to become successful, and he had it. In 1983, Schultz took a trip to Milan that changed everything. He got introduced to a concept that was about to bring tremendous change. It wasn't the espresso that caught his attention, but it was how Italians used cafes. They weren't rushing in and out. They weren't treating coffee as caffeine. It was a pause, a ritual, a social anchor, a place to relax in the middle of a hectic day. Schultz returned to Seattle with one belief: America didn't just need better coffee. America needed a place. He proposed transforming Starbucks from a retail bean store into a cafe where people stayed, talked, worked, and connected. The founders said no, obviously. Investors laughed and said, Americans won't pay premium prices for coffee. They said, especially not to sit down. And how would they say yes? I mean, they didn't see what Schultz did. They wanted Starbucks to remain true to its origins: beans, roasting, equipment. We know every no in history was a starting line for a new beginning. So, in 1985, Schultz left with a vision and started his own company called Il Giornale. He built it around the Italian cafe concept that he fought for, and it worked great. Lines out the door, customers returning daily. Il Giornale grew so quickly that the original Starbucks owners decided to sell the company in 1987, and that's when Schultz bought it for $3.8 million. This is where the next phase of Starbucks begins. 1992, just 6 years after Schultz bought the company, Starbucks went public with only 165 stores. 10 years later, it had over 6,000 locations. By now, you already know that Starbucks didn't explode because of the coffee, taste, or price. It did not even compete on it. It grew by competing on psychology. Because Schultz understood how America was changing, he got a hold on what people actually needed. Work was intensifying. Cities were expanding. People were losing predictable, warm places in the middle of their day. As Howard Schultz famously said, "People need a third place. Not home, not work, somewhere in between." That became the entire business model. It was competing with loneliness, stress, and the feeling of not belonging anywhere during the day. This single idea changed American culture. By 2015, Starbucks had become one of the most visited non-office workspaces in the entire US. Today, there are over 38,000 stores worldwide, with an estimated 4 new Starbucks opening every day. Therefore, Starbucks stores were crafted intentionally. They hired sensory branding specialists to design a space that felt familiar, predictable, and safe. They wanted customers to stay. The lighting was softened. The playlists were curated. Early stores even sold CDs of the music customers loved. The seating layouts were tested so the store felt comfortable, but not sleep-inducing. The bar area was designed so the customer could watch the drink being made, a subtle way of reinforcing transparency and connection. It was shaping daily patterns we never noticed, did we? But what truly made Starbucks more powerful than a simple coffee shop was the extreme level of consistency. Imagine, you could land in a brand new city, exhausted and tired from travel, and still walk into a Starbucks and know exactly what you'll get. That comfort is worth far more than the coffee itself. The store design might shift by region, but the feeling is the same everywhere. That is the genius. Schultz took it to the next level. He brought in operations experts to standardize everything: the espresso machines, the grind size, timing, training manuals, everything. Nothing was left to chance. He developed a system. A latte in Boston tasted nearly identical to a latte in San Diego, and in the 1990s US market, that reliability was rare. That people kept returning because they knew what they would get. In this unpredictable world, Starbucks mastered emotional predictability, consistency, and shaped daily patterns. What truly made Starbucks a global brand was specialized customization that turned a drink into identity. We know drink isn't a commodity. It's an extension. Half calf, extra foam, almond milk, light ice, 2 pumps vanilla. The average number of possible drink combinations at Starbucks is over 170,000. When people design their own drink, they develop ownership. Ownership becomes attachment. Attachment becomes a habit. And habits are very hard to break. And this is why we love Starbucks. Years later came the crisis, like any business would, when left unseen. In 2008, during the financial crisis, Starbucks closed 600 stores. Lost customers. Schultz, who had stepped down as CEO, returned to lead the company again. He realized something critical. Because the system pivoted from its original purpose faced this situation. The fix wasn't cheaper drinks. It was returning to purpose. Right after this reset, Starbucks launched something that quietly reshaped the entire business model. The Starbucks mobile app, introduced in 2009. Over time, it became one of the most successful payment ecosystems in the United States. By 2022, customers had loaded more than $1.5 billion onto Starbucks cards and the app, money Starbucks could use interest-free. Every swipe gave Starbucks data. What time you buy what you order, how often you return, whether you try new products. They don't have to guess what customers want. They know. This data powers product decisions, store placement, menu changes, and loyalty rewards. It's why Starbucks is more profitable per store than McDonald's. And most of all, the engagement app provided. Meanwhile, seasonal releases like the pumpkin spice latte, first launched in 2003, did something unexpected. They turned Starbucks into a cultural timekeeper. When the PSL arrived, fall didn't feel like it was coming. It felt like it had officially begun. As American cities grew more crowded, competition came. Starbucks used a strategy known as clustering, placing stores close together to dominate convenience. If one location was busy, the next was steps away. Competitors had no room to break in, and they won again. By now, Starbucks had developed far from being a cafe into infrastructure, woven into daily American movement the way gas stations and grocery stores are. And everything, from the store design to the seasonal drinks to the loyalty app, pointed toward one structure that they built behind every scene. A structure whose value didn't come from the beverage at all. Starbucks didn't build a coffee business. Starbucks built a daily ritual Americans could depend on. And whether you love Starbucks or not, the strategy is undeniable. They didn't sell caffeine. They sold stability in a world that rarely gives it. And that is how a simple beverage became a lifestyle in America. If stories like this make you see familiar places differently, you're exactly where you belong. This is the quiet genius, where everyday things reveal their hidden logic.